The United Kingdom is currently facing a significant economic crisis. This crisis has been brought about by a combination of internal and external factors, resulting in a challenging economic environment for the country. One of the key factors contributing to the UK economic crisis is the uncertainty surrounding Brexit. The decision to leave the European Union has created a great deal of instability in the UK economy. Businesses are uncertain about the future trading relationship between the UK and the EU, which has led to a decline in investments and a decrease in consumer confidence. Another factor exacerbating the economic crisis is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has caused widespread disruption to businesses across the UK, leading to job losses, reduced productivity, and a decline in consumer spending. The government's response to the pandemic, including lockdown measures and financial support schemes, has put a strain on public finances, further exacerbating the economic challenges. The UK's high levels of public debt have also contributed to the economic crisis. Prior to the pandemic, the government had already accumulated a significant amount of debt, and the response to the crisis has further increased borrowing. This has raised concerns about the sustainability of the UK's public finances and the ability to repay the debt in the long term. The economic crisis has had a severe impact on various sectors of the UK economy. The retail sector, for example, has been hit hard by the decline in consumer spending, with many high street stores closing down and job losses mounting. The hospitality and tourism sectors have also suffered greatly due to travel restrictions and reduced demand. In response to the economic crisis, the UK government has taken various measures to support the economy. These include financial support schemes for businesses, such as the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme and the Bounce Back Loan Scheme, as well as stimulus packages to stimulate economic growth. The government has also sought to negotiate trade deals with other countries to mitigate the impact of Brexit. However, despite these measures, the road to recovery remains challenging. The economic crisis has left a lasting impact on the UK economy, and it will take time for businesses and households to recover fully. The government will need to continue implementing supportive policies and exploring new avenues for economic growth to overcome the challenges posed by the crisis. Hello everyone, let's discuss the reasons of UK economic crisis. Inflation in the United Kingdom has increased to a new 40-year highest and is now in double digits. Britain is now facing rising food prices, a worsening cost of living crisis, and the prospect of a recession. A warning from the IMF central bank intervention, a disorderly currency movement. Now the British pound has fallen to its lowest level ever against the US dollar. The UK now facing what looks increasingly like a financial crisis. Sabotage is thought to be behind 3 leaks in the Nord Stream natural gas pipelines connecting Russia to Europe. The United Kingdom has announced an 80% hike in electricity and gas bills, worsening the current cost of living crisis. The United Kingdom is witnessing one of the worst economic crises in its history, and the Russian gaskets have triggered such a catastrophe for the UK economy that now inflation has touched a 40-year highest at around 10%. Energy bills are shot up by almost 100%. In spite of limiting, and most importantly, the pound has become one of the worst performing currencies, with its value dropping by 24% against the dollar. On top of that, the British government come up with the mini budget that has further triggered such a disaster, that it's now snowballing from an energy crisis into a debt crisis, into a housing crisis, into a currency crisis, and maybe even a banking crisis. The question is, what is so terribly wrong about the UK that its economy has turned into such a disaster? How is this mini budget triggering an economic catastrophe? Dates back to September 20, 2022, and by this time 3 major events had happened. Number 1, the Russians had completely cut off gas, because of which the cost of electricity had shot up by almost 100%. Secondly, on top of the existing gas shortage, winter was incoming for Europe, so energy consumptions were about to hit new peaks from September till December end. Thirdly, even if Europe had 90% of its storage full as of September, it would take only 90 days for it to reach dangerously low levels. So in short, shortage of gas during a peak consumption time with no storage option has shot up energy prices to extreme levels. Now, even though they are receiving help from the US and other countries, the gas prices are still very, very high, and hence the cost of production and inflation have hit a record level of around 10%. This is where on September 20, 2022, the government of UK announced the mini budget to tackle the energy and economic crisis in the UK. The pointers mentioned in this budget have been so terrifying that it shook the economy of UK itself. Today we are publishing our growth plan that sets out a new approach for this new era, built around 3 central priorities. The government is resisting calls for a U-turn on the mini budget despite a run on the pound and the markets being plunged into disaster. The British government's persons admitted that recent announcement of a mini budget has caused a bit of a disruption in the British energy policy. Economy. The question is, what is so wrong about these policies and how has it escalated this crisis? Well, it started with the energy policies of UK. To understand about it, I give you an example like a shopkeeper buy eggs at a cheaper rate and sell it to the customers at a higher rate. Even power companies buy energy in the form of gas and oil, convert that into electricity and sell this electricity at a higher cost to the consumers. So if it costs them £10 to produce 1 megawatt hour of power, then they would sell it to the people at £15 per megawatt hour and make a profit of £5. But as soon as Russia started cutting off gas, since the electricity cost sold, the government introduced an upper cap at £280 per megawatt hour. So even if it caused the power companies £400 to produce 1 megawatt hour of power, they can charge a maximum of only £280 per megawatt hour. So you see, the upper cap itself has come at a very costly rate. Because the average cost of power before invasion was £189 per megawatt hour. But now they have increased this upper cap from £280 to £520 per megawatt hour, or £0.52 per kilowatt hour, which is a 175% increase from last year. And in exchange for this, the government has said that although this unit price is high for the next 2 years, even if the energy prices shoot up, the citizens will still pay £520 per megawatt hour only. So tomorrow, even if the cost of electricity to the power companies shoots up to £900 per megawatt hour, the citizens will still pay £520 per megawatt hour only. On top of that, the government of UK said that they will keep a £400 energy discount this winter, which will be paid by the government, and whatever the losses these power companies will incur in these 2 years will have to be offset from loans given by the banks, and this price upper cap is applicable for everyone. No matter how rich or poor they are, so cost of energy has been increased so people consume less electricity. And for the next 2 years, the citizens don't have to bother about energy bills even if the costs go up. The National Institute of Economic and Social Research explained in UK poor people spend almost 8% of their income on energy, and rich people spent 3% of their income. So the energy bill is such a small proportion of the rich people's income. If you charge the same unit price to both rich and poor, then it is bad economics. To give you an oversimplified context, even though King Charles spends £50,000 per month to power the palace, he will pay the same unit price per unit as you who's living in an apartment, and this is in spite of they consuming way more power. So now the rich and poor are being charged the same cost without any consideration for their consumption. It brings 3 major disasters. Even if the poor uses energy for necessary activities like heating the house, and the rich uses it for a luxury activities, will be charged at the same, and this will weigh very, very heavy on the poor, considering the cost of power is already at 100% surge. Secondly, there is no penalizing the rich for using more power than needed. So obviously the rich and ultra-rich will tend to consume more energy than needed. And lastly, because there is no extra cost for this usage, there is no extra revenue. So even if the energy prices go up to £900 per megawatt hour, the rich will still pay £520 only, even if they can afford to pay £900. And hence the power companies will have to bear the losses, which will then need loans or compensation from the government or the banks. This is the reason why the National Institute of Economic and Social Research proposed a variable slab system, which is, by the way, used in many other countries in the world. The variable system basically says for the first 1,000 units, since it's a necessity, everyone would be priced at same amount, because that is a normal household needs. Until this point, the government will subsidize the cost. But as soon as the slab of necessity is crossed for the next 1,000 units, the cost would drastically climb up to double per unit. And for the next 1,000 units, the cost would be triple depending on the market rates, because only the ultra-rich consumed beyond the unit limits in a month. So neither power companies nor government bears the losses for the rich and ultra-rich. But in the UK, since they are not using this, the analysis say that it's going to cost the government very, very heavily. Because now the losses of the ultra-rich and rich will be borne either by the government or by the power companies. And according to the policy documents, it is said to cost the government as much as £130 billion over the next 18 months. In addition to the $3 trillion debt that they already have. So the question is, how will they get this huge chunk of money? Well, they'll have to raise it through bonds. But there is problem with bonds. UK is after all a developed country, so if the government issues bonds and promises to pay back the people after 10 years, then what exactly is the problem? What UK is even heading towards a bond crisis? which will cause a currency crisis, a mortgage crisis, a banking crisis, and therefore can turn UK into a complete economic mess-up. Now the question is, what's wrong with UK bond market? Let's start with basic. What is a bond? Bond is just a loan to the government given by the people of the country. In this case, if the UK government wants to offset the energy losses with £100 billion, instead of going to the World Bank, it will simply borrow this £100 billion from the people of UK. Now obviously one person cannot give the government £100 billion. So the government will divide this £100 billion bond into 1 million units or less than that, with each unit being worth £1 lakh. So when 1 million people buy 1 unit of this bond, they've essentially loaned the government £100,000 each and £100 billion collectively. And in return the government would guarantee that after 10 years it will return this money with a 5% interest. Means 5 years bond could pay you 2% interest and a 10-year bond could pay you a 5% interest. So according to economic principle, demand-supply forces will come and determine the interest rate of bond in the market. And this will affect the cost of borrowing of the government. So let's try to understand this using a simple example. Let's say there is a 10-year bond that is being sold at £100 per unit at an interest rate of 5%. So if you invest £100 in a 10-year bond, you would get £5 as interest. Now if there is nobody willing to buy these 10-year units from the government at £100, what will the government do? They would decrease the price of the unit to £90, and if a person bought it, he will get £5 in return. They are borrowing just £90 at 5% interest, and in spite of this cost, if still people don't want to buy these units, or there's an oversupply of these bonds in the market, the unit price will drop further to £70. Which means now the government is borrowing £70 at a 5% interest. So because of the demand-supply mismatch, the government is getting less money from the people at a very high interest rate. And this is a very dangerous position for any government where the interest of the bonds are climbing so high. This is the reason why the 10-year bond rates in the UK have gone above almost 300%, going from just about 1% to 4.1% in just 9 months. Now the government is giving bonds at 4% interest, which is absolutely very high. So everyone will rush to buy these bonds, and consequently, interest rates will go down. There is another big problem with UK economy is in the form of currency depreciation, which makes the bond market of the UK almost useless. For example, suppose a person is a billionaire who wants to make money. What would he do? Firstly, he would check the lending rates in the US and check the bond market rates in the UK. So if the US bank is lending at, let's suppose, 2% and the UK bonds are yielding 5%, that investor will decide to enter the market. So firstly, he would borrow $1 million from the US bank, let's say at 2% interest rate. Secondly, he would convert this $1 million into pounds. Now had the conversion will affect as UK currency is depreciated, which would amount to $1.02 million. So if you look at the interest rate of the Feds, he just has to pay 2% interest to the American bank, as in $1.02 million. So out of the $1.05 million, he has to pay $1.02 million, and the rest $0.03 million will be his profit. So you simply by rotating the money, a person is able to make $0.03 million in profit. But today if we look at the market in UK, the value of pound is depreciated by almost 21.4% since January, so now the exchange rate is just 1.1. This means even though the bonds are giving out a 5% interest, because the currency has depreciated by 21%, this will become a disaster for that investor. This is what is exactly happening in the UK, whereby even though the bonds are yielding a 5% interest, the currency has depreciated to such an extent that now it has become a disaster for the investors. As a result, they are quitting the UK market, and this is further decreasing the demand for pounds. As a result, the currency is depreciating further. So now that the pound is depreciating, what will happen? The energy prices will not just spike because of the gas shortage. They will not just spike because of peak consumption levels during winter, but also because of currency depreciation, and this will take the cost of energy in the UK to dangerous levels. And when these energy bills spike up, what will happen? The government of UK will have to borrow more money in order to compensate for these losses. Which means more bonds will float in the market, and the demand for the bonds will go down. And then the interest rate of these bonds will go up, which means the cost of borrowing for the government will increase further, eventually depreciating the currency further, and that will lead to a vicious cycle. On top of that, they've also announced tax cuts which are expected to decrease the government revenues by $45 billion till 2026. So in short, the government of UK is cutting down its own revenues during a cash crunch situation. This is the reason why everybody is scared that this scenario will spiral the entire economy of UK into a freaking disaster. This is the reason why the Bank of England is now about to buy £65 billion worth of bonds so that they could prevent the interest rates from falling at this up. With housing loan spikes due to inflation and bank defaults, it will cause a banking and housing crisis along with energy and currency crisis. This is the story of the economic crisis of the UK. So now UK has the option: one is to withdraw the sanctions, get the gas from Russia and chill, or secondly deal with the complications of its economy by being dependent on the US and hope that they don't mess up. In conclusion, the UK is currently facing a significant economic crisis due to a combination of factors, including Brexit, the COVID-19 pandemic, and high levels of public debt. The crisis has led to job losses, reduced consumer spending, and a decline in business investment. The government has implemented various measures to support the economy, but the road to recovery remains challenging. It is crucial for the government to continue implementing supportive policies and seeking opportunities for economic growth to overcome the challenges and restore stability to the UK economy. Thank you very much for watching my video. If you like, please subscribe to my channel.